This is The Millionaire Next Door, Chapter 1, Part 2. Whatever your age, whatever your income, how much you should be worth right now, for many years of surveying various high-income, high-net-worth people, we have developed several multivariative-based wealth equations. A simple rule of thumb, however, is more than adequate in computing one's expected net worth. Multiply your age times your realized pre-tax annual household income from all sources except inheritances. Divide by 10. This, less any inherited wealth, is what your net worth should be. For example, if Mr. Anthony O. Duncan is 41 years old, makes $143,000 a year, and has investments that return another $12,000 a year, he would multiply $155,000 by 41. That equals $6.3 million. Dividing by 10, his net worth should be $635,000. If Miss Lucy R. Frankel is 61 and has a total annual realized income of $235,000, her next net worth should be $1.4 million. Given your age and income, how does your net worth match up? Where do you stand along the wealth continuum? If you are in the top quartile for wealth accumulation, you are a PAW, or prodigious accumulator of wealth. If you are in the bottom quartile, you are a UAW, or under accumulator of wealth. Are you a PAW or a UAW? Or just a AAW, average accumulator of wealth? We have developed another simple rule. To be well positioned in the PAW category, you should be worth twice the level of wealth expected. In other words, if Mr. Duncan's net worth/wealth should be approximately twice the expected value or more of his income/age cohort, or $635,000 multiplied by 2 equals $1.2 million. If Mr. Duncan's net worth is approximately $1.27 million or more, he is a prodigious accumulator of wealth. Conversely, what if his level of wealth is 1/2 or less than expected for all those in his income/age category? Mr. Duncan would be classified as a UAW if his level of wealth were $317,000 or less, or 1/2 of $635,000. PAWs versus YAWs. PAWs are builders of wealth. That is, they are the best at building net worth compared to others in their income/age category. PAWs typically have a minimum of 4 times the wealth accumulated by YAWs. Contrasting the characteristic of PAWs and YAWs is one of the most revealing parts of the research we have conducted over the past 20 years. A good example of the difference between PAWs and YAWs is revealed in 2 case studies. Mr. Miller, Bubba Richards, age 50, is a proprietor of a mobile home dealership. His total household income last year was $90,000. Mr. Richards' net worth, as computed via the wealth equation, is expected to be $451,000, but Bubba is a PAW. His actual net worth is $1.1 million. His counterpart, James H. Ford II, Mr. Ford, age 51, is an attorney. His income last year was $92,000, slightly more than Mr. Richards. What is Mr. Ford's actual net worth? His expected level of wealth? Mr. Ford's actual net worth is $226,000, while his expected level of wealth, again computed by the wealth equation, is $470,000. Mr. Ford, by our definition, is an underaccumulator of wealth. Mr. Ford spent 7 years in college. How could he possibly have less wealth than a mobile home dealer? In fact, Mr. Richards has nearly 5 times the net worth of Mr. Ford. And remember, both are in the same income/age cohort. In trying to answer the above question, ask yourself 2 simpler questions. How much money does it take to maintain the upper middle class lifestyle of an attorney and his family? How much money is required to maintain the middle class or even blue collar lifestyle of a mobile home dealer and his family. Clearly, Mr. Ford, the attorney, must spend significantly more of his household income to maintain and display his family's higher upper middle class lifestyle. What make of motor vehicle is congruent with the status of an attorney? Foreign luxury, no doubt. Who needs to wear a different high quality suit to work each day? Who needs to join one or more country clubs? Who needs expensive Tiffany silverware and serving trays? Mr. Ford, the yaw, has a higher propensity to spend than do the members of the PAW group. Yaws tend to live above their means. They emphasize consumption, and they tend to de-emphasize many of the key factors that underlie wealth building. You or your ancestors. Most of Americans' millionaires are first-generation rich. How is it possible for people from modest backgrounds to become millionaires in one generation? Why is it that so many people with similar socioeconomic backgrounds never accumulate even modest amounts of wealth? Most people who become millionaires have confidence in their own abilities. They do not spend time worrying about whether or not their parents are wealthy. They do not believe that one must be born wealthy. Conversely, people of modest backgrounds who believe that only the wealthy produce millionaires are predetermined to remain non-affluent. Have you always thought that most millionaires are born with silver spoons in their mouths? If so, consider the following facts that our research uncovered about American millionaires. Only 19% receive any income or wealth of any kind from a trust fund or an estate. Fewer than 20% inherited 10% or more of their wealth. More than half never received as much as $1 in inheritance. Fewer than 25% ever received an act of kindness of $10,000 or more from their parents, grandparents, or other relatives. 91% never received as a gift as much as $1 of the ownership of the family business. Nearly half never received any college tuition from their parents or other relatives. Fewer than 10% believe they will ever receive an inheritance in the future. America continues to hold the great prospects for those who wish to accumulate wealth in one generation. In fact, America has always been a land of opportunity for those who believe in the fluid nature of our nation's social system and economy. More than 100 years ago, the same was true. In the American economy, Stanley LeBerk reviews a study conducted in 1892 of the 4,000 American millionaires. He reports that 84% were nouveau rich, having reached the top without benefit of inherited wealth. Britannia rules. Just before the American Revolution, most of the nation's wealth was held by landowners. More than half the land was owned by people who either were born in England or were born in America of English parents. Is more than half the nation's wealth now of English origin? No. One of the major myths concerning wealth in this country relates to ethnic origin. Too many people think that America's affluent population is composed predominantly of direct descendants of the Mayflower voyagers. The top 10 ancestry groups of American millionaires. Let's examine this assumption objectively. What if country of origin were the major factor in explaining variation in wealth? We would accept that more than half of America's millionaire population would be of English ancestry. This is not the case. In our most recent national survey of millionaires, we asked the respondents to designate their country of origin, ancestry, ethnic origin. The results may surprise you. The top 10 ancestry groups of American millionaires. Those designating English as their ethnic origin accounted for 21.1% of the millionaire population. People of English origin accounted for 10.3% of the United States household population in general. Thus, American millionaires of English origin are more prevalent than expected, given their numbers in the entire U.S. population. 10.3% versus 21.1%. In other words, this group has a millionaire concentration ratio of 2.06. 21% of all millionaire households divided by 10.3% of households headed by persons of English origin, meaning that people of English origin are about twice as likely to head households in the millionaire category than would be expected from their portion of households in America. And yet, what percentage of the English ancestry group in America is in the millionaire category? Would you expect the English group to rank first? In fact, it ranks fourth. According to our research, 7.71% of all households in the English category have a net worth of $1 million or more. 3 other ancestry groups have significantly higher concentrations of millionaires. How can it be possible that the English ancestry group does not have the highest concentration of millionaire households? After all, they were among the first Europeans to arrive in the New World. They were on the ground floor to take economic advantage in this land of opportunity. In 1790, colonial America, more than 2/3 of households were headed by a self-employed person. In America, the achievements of the current generation are more a factor in explaining wealth accumulation than what has taken place in the past. Again, most American millionaires today, about 80%, are first-generation rich. Typically, the fortunes built by these people will be completely dissipated by the second or third generation. The American economy is a fluid one. There are many people today who are on their way to becoming wealthy, and there are many others who are spending their way out of the affluent category. Winning ancestry groups. If the English ancestry group does not have the highest concentration of millionaire households, then which group does? The Russian ancestry group ranks first, the Scottish ranks second, and the Hungarian ranks third. Although the Russian ancestry group accounts for about 1.1% of all households in America, it accounts for 4.6% of all millionaire households. We estimate that approximately 22 out of every 100 households headed by someone of Russian ancestry has a net worth of $1 million or more. This is a sharp contrast to the English ancestry group, in which only 7.71 in 100 of its members are in the Millionaire League. How much wealth does this Russian-American millionaire group have in total? We estimate approximately 1.1 trillion, or nearly 5% of all the personal wealth in America today. How can one explain the economic productivity of Russian Americans? In general, most American millionaires are manager-owners of businesses. Russians, in disproportionate numbers, are manager-owners of businesses. Further, this entrepreneurial spirit seems to translate from one generation of Russians to the next. The Hungarian ancestry group is also entrepreneurial inclined. This group accounts for only 0.5% of all the households in the country, yet it makes up 2% of the millionaire households. Contrast this with the German ancestry group, which accounts for nearly 1 in 5 households, 19.5% in this country, and only 17% of all the millionaire households are headed by persons of a German ancestry, and only 3.3% of German households are in the Millionaire League. Thrifty Scots. The Scottish ancestry group makes up only 1.7% of all households, but it accounts for 9.3% of the millionaire households in America. Thus, in terms of concentration, the Scottish ancestry group is more than 5 times, 5.47, more likely to contain millionaire households than would be expected from its overall portion, 1.7% of American households. The Scottish ancestry group ranks second in terms of the percentage of its clan that are in the Millionaire League. Nearly 21 in 100 of its households are millionaires. What explains this Scottish ancestry group's high ranking? It is true that many Scots were early immigrants to America, but this is not the major reason for their economic productivity. Remember that the English were among the earliest immigrants, yet their concentration numbers are far lower than those of the Scots. Also consider that the Scots did not enjoy the same solid economic status that the English enjoyed during the years the nation was in its infancy. Given these facts, one would think that the English ancestry group would account for a higher but concentration of millionaire households than those in the Scottish group. But just the opposite is the case. Again, the Scottish ancestry group has a concentration level nearly 3 times that of the English group, 5.47 versus 6.02 or 2.06. What then makes the Scottish ancestry group so unique? If an ancestry group has a high concentration of millionaires, what would we expect the income of characteristics of that group to be? The expectation is that the group would have an equally high concentration of high-income producers. Income is highly correlated with net worth. More than 2/3 of millionaires in America have annual household incomes of $100,000 or more. In fact, this correlation exists for all major ancestry groups, but one, the Scottish. This group has a much higher number of net worth households than can be explained by the presence of high-income producing households. High-income producing Scottish ancestry households account for less than 2% of all high-income households in America. But remember that the Scottish ancestry group accounts for 9.3% of the millionaire households in America today. More than 60% of the Scottish ancestry millionaires have annual household incomes of less than $100,000. No other ancestry group has such a high concentration of millionaires from such a small concentration of high-income producing households. If income does not come near in explaining the affluence of the Scottish ancestry group in America, what factors do shed light on this phenomenon? There are several fundamental factors. First, Scottish Americans tend to be frugal. Given a household's income, there is a corresponding mathematical expectation of level of consumption. Members of this group do not fit such expectations. On average, they live well below the norm for people in various income categories. They often live in self-designated environments of relative scarcity. A household of Scottish ancestry with an annual income of $100,000 will often consume at a level typical for an American household with an annual income of $85,000. Being frugal allows them to save more and invest more than others in similar income groups. Thus, the same $100,000 income-producing households of Scottish descent saves and invests at a level comparable to the typical American household that annually earns nearly $150,000. In the chapters that follow, we reveal the highest prices typical millionaires reported paying for suits, shoes, watches, and motor vehicles. A significantly greater number of millionaires with Scottish ancestry reported paying less for each item than the norm for all millionaires in the sample. For example, more than 2/3 of Scottish millionaires paid less for their most expensive motor vehicle than the norm for millionaires surveyed. Because they accumulate wealth, the Scottish ancestry affluent have wealth to pass on to their offspring. Our research reveals that Scottish offspring typically become economically and emotionally independent even as young adults. Thus, they tend to not drain their parents' wealth. Members of the Scottish ancestry group have been able to instill their values of thrift, discipline, economic achievement, and financial independence in successive generations. These values are also typical traits among most self-made millionaires. Small populations. Often small population groups are underrepresented in studies of those affluent, yet many contain high concentration of wealthy households. What small groups in particular? We estimate that all of the 15 small population ancestry groups shown in Table 1 to 2 have at least twice the proportion of millionaires than the proportion for all U.S. households. Only about 3.5% of all U.S. households are in the $1 million net worth league. All the groups listed in Table 1 to 2 are estimated to contain at least twice this proportion. In total, all 15 account for less than 1% of all affluent households. In fact, there is compelling evidence of an inverse relationship between the size of an ancestry group and the proportion of its members that are wealthy. In other words, larger ancestry groups contain smaller proportions of millionaires on average than smaller groups. What about the number of years that an average member of an ancestry group has been in America? The longer the time here, the less likely it will produce a disproportionately large percentage of millionaires. Why is this the case? Because we are a consumption-based society. In general, the longer the average member of an ancestry group has been in America, the more likely he or she will become fully socialized to our high consumption lifestyle. There is another reason. First-generation Americans tend to be self-employed. Self-employment is a major positive correlation of wealth. Table 1 to 2, the top 15 economically productive small population ancestry groups. This is not to suggest that self-employment and or being first-generation American ensures membership among the ranks of millionaires. Most self-employed Americans will never accumulate even the modest levels of wealth. The same is true for the most first-generation Americans, but 23 million people in this country today were born elsewhere. That is a large gene pool. Note that 12% of Inc. magazine's top 500 business entrepreneurs are first-generation American. One might expect that the sons, daughters, grandsons, and granddaughters of these people would automatically become even more successful economically than they. Not really. We will discuss intergenerational transfers in more detail in Chapter 5 and 6, but allow us at this juncture to explain why the next generation is often less productive economically than the last. Victor and his children. Take the case of Victor, a successful entrepreneur who's first-generation American. Entrepreneurs like him have typically been characterized by their thrift, low status, discipline, low consumption risk, and very hard work. But after these genetic wonders become financial successes, then what? What do they teach their children? Do they encourage them to follow dad's lead? Do their children also become roofing contractors, excavation contractors, scrap metal dealers, and so on? The chances are that they don't. Fewer than 1 in 5 do. No. Victor wants his children to have a better life. He encourages them to spend many years in college. Victor wants his children to become physicians, lawyers, accountants, executives, and so on. But in so encouraging them, Victor essentially discourages his children from becoming entrepreneurs. He unknowingly encourages them to postpone their entry into the labor market, and of course he encourages them to reject his lifestyle of thrift and self-imposed environment scarcity. Victor wants his children to have a better life, but what exactly does Victor mean when he says that? He means that his children should be well educated and have a much higher occupational status than he did. Also, better means better artifacts, fine homes, and new luxury automobiles, quality clothing, club membership, but Victor has neglected to include in this definition of better many of the elements that were the foundation stones of his success. He does not realize that being well educated has a certain economic drawbacks. Victor's well-educated adult children have learned that a high level of consumption is expected of people who spend many years in college and professional schools. Today, his children are under accumulators of wealth. They are the opposite of their father, the blue-collar, successful business owner. His children have become Americanized. They are part of the high-consuming, employment-postponing generation. How many generations does it take for an ancestry group that today contains thousands of Victors to become Americanized? Only a few. Most move into the American normal range within 1 or 2 generations. This is why America needs a constant flow of immigrants with the courage and tenacity of Victor. These immigrants and their immediate offspring are constantly needed to replace the Victors of America. The authors and Toddy and Alex. Several years ago, we were asked to conduct a study of the affluent in America. We were hired by Toddy, a corporate finance president of a subsidiary of a large corporation. Toddy's ancestors were English, his forefathers in America before the Revolutionary War. More recently, they owned steel mills in Pennsylvania. Todd, their direct descendant, attended a exclusive prep school in New England. Later, he graduated from Princeton University. While in college, he played varsity football. Toddy, like many people in this country, have always believed that wealthy people inherited their fortunes. Toddy also believed that most people had English roots. So what happened to Toddy's long-held opinions after he joined us out in the survey field, meeting Americans' millionaires? Most of the millionaire respondents Toddy met were first-generation affluent, and most were not of the English origin. Most of them attended public schools. They drove American-made automobiles. They preferred club sandwiches to caviar, and unlike Toddy, most were frugal. Toddy's education was enhanced by another event. During the course of our assignment, an entrepreneur named Alex approached Toddy and the senior officers of the corporation. Alex wanted to buy the firm that employed Toddy. Who was this Alex fellow, anyway? His father had immigrated to this country from Russia before Alex was born. His dad was a small business owner. Alex had graduated from a state university. How could it be possible, Toddy asked, that this fellow wants to, and has the resources to, buy the company? Alex's dad answered the question quite succinctly. Alex is a self-made millionaire. His is the prototypical American success story. Conversely, Toddy and others like him are engaged species. Someday, they may even be extinct. This is especially true for those who spend a lot of time reminiscing about how their late ancestors founded steel mills, railroads, and Pony Express services long, long ago. Our profile of a typical millionaire is based on studies of millionaire households, not individuals. It is, therefore, impossible in most cases to say with certainty whether our typical millionaire is a he or she. Nevertheless, because 95% of millionaire households are composed of married couples, and because in 70% of these cases, the male head of the household contributes at least 80% of the income, we will usually refer to the typical American as he in this book.